Oh, genial.
Good morning.
Morning.
How's everybody doing?
Good.
Great. When Pedro Menendez founded St. Augustine in 1565, he and his soldiers, they brought in 500 firearms, beyond muskets, arquebuses, and calibers. There are only two requirements for these three guns. The first, it must be made of a solid piece of hardwood. That means no knots, no cracks and splinters. Second, it must have a ball mold to it. It could be any caliber, but they range from 40, 60, 80 calibers. But that's why you have to have a ball mold. Each gun would be different. Parts of the gun would be the stock, the trigger, the pan, the serpent, and the barrel. What gives it its name and the ignition source is the concord in my hand, which we call a match. It's going to burn very hot, very slow, about a foot an hour. Kill range for this gun is 40 to 60 yards effectively. It's going to kill at maybe 300 yards. You do not know how accurate it would be. If I'm lucky, I would hit a building across the field. Now the musket. It is here in St. Augustine. It's not common. They're just too big and heavy. Muskets are 5.5 foot tall, 70, 80 caliber. They're all about the same distance of 200 to 300 yards. The muskets were designed for one thing, to take a man off a horse. We don't have to worry about that. The reason being, the horse isn't here yet. Pedro Menendez tried bringing horses. That didn't end well. These are not your primary weapons. The primary weapon at the time, the soldiers are mostly using lances and swords. These guns are starting to become more popular. They do have rifles, but rifles, they're so expensive and time consuming. They would cost about $3,000 to $4,000 to make, take 5 minutes to reload, but they're very accurate. As the musket and the arquebus, they do become more popular. The locks would change from the matchlock to the wheel lock, snap-ons, the dog lock, what we know now as a flintlock. This is your standard muzzle loader. What does that mean? That means everything's going down the front. We're going to prime our pan first. To prime my pan, I would be using a very fine powder. Next, your main charge. To carry my main charge, this belting is called a bandolier. Each bottle is called a powder charger or a box. Pour down the muzzle of your gun. Wadding will then follow. Wadding in Europe would be felt plugs dipped in oil. We're using plugs of moss more commonly. Shot, solid lead ball, or a bag of BBs. Run everything down. Do you think we're ready to fire? No. We're going to take our match now, blow on it. By blowing on the match, you are removing the ash. That is exposing the hot part of the coals. Fix it to the jaws of the serpent. When you're ready to fire, open the pan, pull on the trigger. Nothing happens. One reason is the match may not be hot enough. Second reason is the main ingredient is black powder. And black powder is charcoal. What does charcoal do? It absorbs moisture. Without the powder making the gun useless. Let's say the match does ignite the powder. It'll send the flame through a touch hole, hitting the main charge, sending the ball forward. This gun only works 60% of the time. That's a 40% chance of not working. Not very good odds, right? This gun is designed to be used as a club. A well-trained soldier can have a shot off every 30 to 40 seconds. Let's see how this goes. I'm going to give the command to load. When I give the command to fire, have your ears covered. Prime and load! Attention, please. Cover your ears. Good. Foot. Could I answer any questions?
Cayuco. Please do not climb.
Y no veo.
Ready?
But at the end of the day, you can't. How y'all doing?
Good morning.
Hi.
Have you been in the spring house yet? Okay, great.
Ahora no me brinca en la cara.
¿Te acuerdas cuando estaban trepados allá arriba? Qué lindos. Esos colores son bellos. Esas pestañas que
Hola, ¿qué hace? ¿Será que podemos regresar después de esto? No.
¿no?
You know there are more shark teeth on the bottom of the ocean than there are stars in the sky. And
¿Qué se apunta? No está apuntando nada.
Qué lindos son esos árboles.
Los cipreses esos, grandotes.
But it's too cold up that way for me.
That's why we're coming down this
I
way.
like these poor old iguanas that fall out of the trees every year when it gets cold. It gets cold, I just kind of freeze up like an iguana. Thought maybe our school group had arrived. That's just a family over there. The show.
We're gonna wait till you move down that way.
So, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the blacksmith shop. I'm Greg the blacksmith. Over here in the corner is Colin, one of our other blacksmiths here at the Fountain of Youth. And this morning, I'm going to tell you guys about blacksmithing back in the time of Pedro Menendez, the founder of this colony of St. Augustine. 460 years ago, Pedro Menendez came here from Spain to build this colony, and he brought everything and everybody he needed to get the job done, including 6 blacksmiths. Now, blacksmiths are metal workers who work with iron and steel. Going all the way back to ancient times, iron and steel were collectively known as the black metal. So guys, the black in blacksmith is just like the gold in goldsmith or the silver in silversmith. It just tells you what kind of metal we work with. So don't listen to any of those vicious rumors about soot. Soot's got nothing to do with it. The smith part comes from the old English word smite, which means to strike or hit. Over the years, all that smiting gets turned into smithing to describe metal workers who hammer their raw materials to make things. So smiths are all metal workers, but the blacksmiths who came here with Pedro Menendez were not doing any Hollywood movie stuff. Guys, the last time you saw a blacksmith in a movie, I'd be willing to bet you he was either making a sword or shoeing a horse. That seems to be the only 2 things that Hollywood knows about us blacksmiths, and Hollywood doesn't know a whole lot. These people were smart. They packed up all the swords that they needed back in Spain, right along with all the other weapons and armor that they knew their soldiers were going to have as soon as they got here. Wouldn't make any sense to come all this way and leave your swords at home, would it? No. So they brought all the swords they needed. As far as the horses go, they wound up walking on nothing but packed sand here. There's no rocky ground in this part of Florida. There were no paved roads built yet, so it would have been a waste of time shoeing the horses when they didn't have to. And they had no time to waste because they were working very hard to get roofs over heads, provide shelter for their settlers, to build houses. But guys, you can't build houses with your bare hands. You have to have tools to work with. They understood that. They brought plenty of tools with them. But in the course of all this work getting done, what's going to happen to tools? They're going to get bent and broken, and the blacksmiths were here to repair them. They become dull, the blacksmiths would resharpen them. If they couldn't be repaired or resharpened, well, the blacksmiths would have to make new tools. Because without tools to work with, the colony's not going to get built. So tools were very important, but so was hardware. Guys, they didn't have Home Depot 460 years ago, but here they were building houses. So yeah, they needed nails, hinges, latches, hooks, and chains. Back in the 16th century, all of that stuff had to be made by hand. But it didn't stop there. Blacksmiths also made common everyday household goods, things that people use in their everyday life. One thing we all do every day is eat, hopefully, but before we can eat, somebody has to cook. Well, the only way they had to cook back then was cooking over fire. But thanks to the ingenuity and skill of the blacksmiths, 460 years ago, they quite literally did have low, medium, and high heat right there at the fingertips. That's called a cooking trammel, and what you're looking at is basically the knob on your stove 460 years ago. Now, to make all this stuff, they had to have raw material. There's no iron here in Florida. So just like all the other materials they brought to build the colony with, they did bring iron and steel all the way from Spain, and they brought plenty of it. It arrived here already rolled out into rods, bars, straps, and sheets. They also brought all the tools and equipment. Now, the most important piece of equipment in any blacksmith shop, the heart of the operation, is, of course, that hot fire right there called the forge. But what I'm burning in my forge is not coal, just like there's no iron here in Florida, there's no coal here. They were making and burning wood charcoal as their primary fuel for cooking with, for heating their homes, and for blacksmithing. Such an important fuel that there were people whose job it was to do nothing but make charcoal. So us blacksmiths didn't have to make our own charcoal, we just burned lots of it. Now, wood charcoal in a cooking fire will never get hot enough to work metal because it'll never get enough oxygen to generate the levels of heat that we need. That's why we had this big air pump back here called the bellows. We pump air to that fire, feeding it more and more oxygen is going to run my fire all the way up to 2,500 degrees. That is quite literally hot enough to melt steel. But we never melt metal in a blacksmith shop. All we want to do is get it hot to make it soft so that we can shape it into things. Soft enough that I can bend it back and forth, it's not going to break, because right now that metal's hot enough to be fully malleable. I can stretch it, twist it, cut it, punch holes in it, anything that I need to do. But that's why the fire's so important. We have to get the metal very, very hot before it does become soft so that we can shape it. So a blacksmith without a fire would be like a welder without a torch. We're going fishing. That's right. So let's make something here real quick. Show you folks how this all works. Now I say real quick because in a 10-minute program we don't have time to go big and fancy. We got to keep it small and simple, but still relevant to this historical site. One thing we know they went through bunches of building this colony are nails of all different sizes. But the nails of the colonial period, it didn't matter how small or how big the nail was, they were square in cross-section, having 4 flat sides, simply because of how they were made. Every time we strike a piece of hot, soft metal with our hammer, the hammer's going to be flattening the top of the metal. The anvil supporting from below flattens the bottom at the same time. So every time I strike, I'm flattening 2 sides. Quarter turn, hit it again, 4 side square nail. Put the point on it, I just go back and forth on 2 sides. That'll keep it square as I stretch it out to a point. So it was the best way to get the job done, and that's why they did it that way. All right, first thing first, we got to get our metal hot. Now, blacksmiths do not use thermometers, so to us temperature doesn't mean anything. We go a different way. We observe the color of the metal to determine how hot it is. First color it will turn when it gets hot enough is red hot, but that's just where it begins. As the metal gets hotter and softer, it's going to glow lighter and brighter in color. So it's going to go from red hot up to orange hot, from orange hot up to yellow hot, from yellow hot all the way up to white hot. Never bring it all the way up to white heat. That'll just melt the metal and burn it up. So to make the nail, red will not be hot enough. Yellow's going to be too hot. So we are going to go with good old dependable orange hot, which is an ideal color for hot forging metal. And it looks orange. And we'll start by flattening 2 sides of our nail. Give it a quarter turn and flatten the other 2 sides and make it square. Now I just go back and forth on my first 2 sides, keeping it square as I stretch the end longer and thinner. I angle the head of my hammer to taper it down to a point. Just that quick and easy, guys. We have a square, sharp, pointy nail that is clearly much too long. We got to cut that down to size. We'll use a hot cutting tool called a Hardy. That looks like an upside down chisel, and it goes right here in this square hole called the Hardy hole. Using that, we'll just tap in 4 deep notches, being careful not to cut the nail all the way off because we're not done. That nail's missing something. It's the headless nail of St. Augustine. Oh my. Now, put a head on a nail is pretty simple. Can anybody guess how you do it? Huh? Well, yeah, to put a head on a nail, all you got to do is hit the nail on the head. That's right. You just got to get the metal hot to make it soft so you can squish it with your hammer like squishing a piece of Play-Doh. Then you have to have a tool that will hold it so that it can't possibly move. Lock your nail in place, break it off where we just notched it, leave up just a little bit of that hot, soft metal. Now the nail can't go anywhere, so if I hit it on the head with my hammer, I'm squishing it like Play-Doh, and it's going to expand and form a head on the end of my nail. Now to hold it for me, I'm going to use this tool over here called a post vise. I like to use this for our shows because it brings the action up high enough where you guys sitting down can see. But let me ask y'all a quick question. Do they have these back then? What do you think? No? Are you sure? Have you ever played Where's Waldo? Yeah? Well, that's Waldo. Take a good look. And we're going to play Where's Waldo. Folks, here we have a copy of a woodcut engraving from the 1500s that we acquired from a museum. So this is a copy of a piece of Renaissance artwork from about 500 years ago. There's a blacksmith, and no, that's not me. I didn't pose for that picture. There's his bellows, his forge, his hammer, his tongs. Have you found Waldo yet?
There.
There's Waldo. Perfectly drawn rendition of a blacksmith's vice in a blacksmith's shop, drawn by an artist 500 years ago. And guys, that tool is actually listed in the inventory of tools that they brought with them here in 1565, which is why we have one, because we have historical documentation that they did. All right, let's put a hit on that nail so you guys get time to get down to the cannon demonstration. Just enough metal here to form our head with. Make sure he's locked in good. Bring it off right where I notched it. Take my hammer and just tap him on the head. Just like that, we got a hit on our nail. But wait, there's more. It's time for thrills, chills, danger, and excitement. Everybody watch very carefully as my brave assistant right there comes up here. Come on, brave assistant. Now you.
Go.
You.
You too.
You.
Kids, go.
No, her. Now watch very carefully as my brave assistant grabs this 1,000-degree steel rod barehanded. Go ahead, right there. Now is that 1,000 degrees? What do you think? Is it? No. Now you know why I don't need to wear gloves. I'm smart enough not to grab the end that's 1,000 degrees.
Oh.
So yeah, guys, that piece of metal is 1,000 degrees at the other end. At the other end. That metal, iron, and steel are poor conductors of heat, so the heat is going to travel very slowly through that rod, and that's why we don't wear gloves in here. We just have to pay attention. Remember, don't grab that end. Not a good idea. Now that nail, on the other hand, is that a big long piece of metal? No, so it's had a chance for the whole thing to get hot. So I won't trust it with my fingers. I'll use these tongs that I made. Yeah, that would have left a mark. I like these tongs. Did you know they didn't have dentists back then? Us blacksmiths had to help people out. You don't have a loose tooth, do you, buddy? No? Oh, okay. Now, anybody have a question? Any questions? Well, guys, it's time to head on down to the cannon demonstration right down there by the watchtower where you see the folks sitting on the bench down there. Don't worry, they'll tell you when to cover up your ears. Oh, yeah.
Good. Excellent. Well, my name's Anthony. That's Bob in there. What we're going to be doing for you today is a demonstration of a couple weapons that Pedro Menendez, the founder of St. Augustine, would have landed with when he came here in September of 1565. We're going to start off on the quiet side and work our way up from there. While holding is probably pretty familiar. This is, of course, a crossbow, or in Spanish, a ballesta. Now, crossbows have been very popular in Europe during the Middle Ages due to their ease of use and ability to puncture armor, specifically chain mail, at long distances. However, by 1565, when St. Augustine is founded, crossbows are considered outdated. Nobody in Europe wanted to use crossbows anymore to equip their troops. Instead, they wanted fancy new matchlock firearms, like muskets or arquebuses, something that could puncture the plate armor that had replaced chain mail. Despite that, Pedro Menendez still saw fit to bring 30 crossbows with him, and there were two good reasons for that. For one, crossbows were very, very cheap to purchase in the mid-16th century. If you want to lead an expedition to the New World in those days, you pretty much had to pay for everything yourself. It means you had to buy or rent your own ships, get your own supplies, hire your own men, and now you had to arm everybody too. So when it came time to arm your men, you were on a tight budget. So you'd have to purchase older, cheaper weapons still deemed to be reliable, just like modern-day military surplus. We're talking about older, outdated weapons like javelins, halberds like you see here, the older cannon we're going to fire off later on, and of course, the crossbow. However, the most important reason why crossbows were brought over is that crossbows don't need gunpowder to work. Due to the very hot, wet, humid, and of course rainy environment of Florida, the Spanish learn pretty quickly, and sometimes their firearms just don't work. That's because of one of the base ingredients in gunpowder at the time, charcoal. Charcoal loves to absorb moisture. You get your gunpowder wet, well, congratulations. That musket or arquebus becomes a club just like that. Crossbows, though, don't have that issue. They can shoot even in the rain. That's what makes them excellent backup weapons in the New World. Now, the projectile for a crossbow is not called an arrow. It's pretty close, though. It's actually called a bolt or a quarrel. Bolts are different from arrows because they're shorter, they're heavier, and most importantly, they're only fletched or feathered on the two sides. That is so they can lay flat against the grooves of the crossbow when you're loading. Now, crossbows come in a variety of shapes and sizes in the 16th century, but they're all going to have a few basic parts. They're all going to have a stirrup, a steel bow or lath, a bow string, a rolling nut, a stock or tiller, and a bar underneath that acts as a trigger mechanism. Now, this is a very light demonstration crossbow representing one from about 1500. It looks pretty authentic, but there's a slight problem with it. It's somewhat underpowered. See, every crossbow is going to have something called the draw weight, which is basically the physical amount of force measured in pounds that it takes to pull the string all the way back. This one only has a draw weight of 45 pounds, so I can pull this bowstring back pretty easily by hand. However, your actual military crossbows from the 16th century would have a draw weight of well over 100 pounds, requiring you to use some sort of separate tool to mechanically assist you in pulling that string back into place. This one, however, is not that impressive. All I gotta do for it is put my foot through a stirrup, pull back on the string, lock the string into a rolling nut, and I'll be safe to shoot. Like so. Now I'm going to grab a modern crossbow bolt with green plastic fletching, slide in between the grooves. Now let's see what I can do. Not bad, not bad. You guys look astounded. Now, crossbows are not precision implements. They don't have sights on them, so aiming can be a bit of a challenge, even on a good day. Do it one more time. Well, I would have got the guy behind him at least. Well then, I'm going to turn over the Bob, our master gunner. Thank you.
Hey guys, how you doing? Who wants to hear the cannon go off? That's what you came here for, right? Just about everybody wants to, so we'll do it. The cannon we're going to fire is the one on the platform. Now that's a replica, not an original, but it's a very good copy of a type of cannon called a bombardetta. And it was just as old and obsolete as the crossbow or halberd and any of these other still medieval type weapons that Menendez brought here. We know that he brought about 20 cannons to this site. Many of them were these bombardetta cannons that looked like ours. And he built a fort along the water's edge, probably about where the path goes today. So not only is the field behind you the site of the first settlement in St. Augustine, this is also the site where the first fort was built. Now the bombardetta being from the 1300s, nobody in the armies of Europe wanted those things, so they were cheap to buy, and so Menendez just took advantage of that. Now they had cannons like these. They were starting to make these big cast iron cannons in the 1500s. These would have been modern cannons in those days. They're very powerful, but they were too heavy to try to bring into a place like this on the small boats you have to use to come in here on. So these would have remained out there on the ships. But this is typical of a naval cannon. It's a muzzle loading cannon. It takes a long time to load one. There's lots of steps involved. Everything has to be loaded from the muzzle end and pushed down the barrel of the ramrod. They have to be sponged out or swabbed out in between shots to put out any burning embers from the last shot before you reload it with new gunpowder. You don't want to skip that step. And all that could take up to 2 minutes to reload a cannon like that. So they're very powerful. This one's called a Spanish Long 9. It had a long barrel and it fired a 9-pound cannonball almost 2 miles. So that was top technology. Now the bombardetta cannon, nothing like that one. When they made that style cannon using technology from the 1300s, it was very primitive in comparison. The cannon barrel was actually made out of a lot of smaller parts and pieces, forged, welded together by a group of armorers, And it took them weeks to make a cannon barrel like that in those days. And when they were finished with that, they had something that looked like ours with all those reinforcing rings up the barrel, but also that cannon barrel was a tube that was open at both ends. So gunpowder and wadding went into separate pieces called powder mugs, or servidors, which would be that cylinder that you see beside the cannon. So gunpowder and wadding in a piece like that goes up into the back of the cannon barrel, then a block of wood and a wedge is driven in behind it to hold it there, and then the cannonball got loaded from the front, or the muzzle end. But because each cannon would typically have 3, 4, maybe even 5 servidors, those things could be preloaded and then reloaded, switched out and reloaded after they're fired. Using that system, it's possible to fire a cannon 2 times a minute pretty consistently. So that's a lot faster than one shot every 2 minutes. But our cannon, the Bombardette, is nowhere near as powerful. It's going to be restricted to smaller 6-pound solid shot. All cannonballs were solid. They didn't have exploding cannonballs yet. And with a full load of gunpowder in the servidor, when these cannons were new, they had a maximum range of somewhere close to 1,700 yards, almost a mile. But if you wanted to hit anything or do any damage, it better be a half a mile or less. So they're fast to load and shoot, but they're short range. Now that may have influenced Pedro Menendez's thinking and why he decided this spot, of all places, was a good place to build his fort. And it really has to do with the bay, the shallowness of the bay, and then the old original inlet that existed in those days. It was over by where the lighthouse is today, because both of those were never more than 9 feet deep at high tide. Now the large ships that came over here from on Europe, it required 12 to 15 feet of water, so they would have to remain anchored in the ocean, and where they were at was about 3 miles straight out from here. So nobody had cannons that could shoot that far. Menendez knew that, and he knew that if the enemy, and it would have been the French at that point, if they're ever going to attack us, they're going to go through that inlet and across this bay at high tide. They're going to be in small boats. They can go in shallow water, and they won't have cannons on them. And the bay was wide open without any of the vegetation that we have today, so you could see anybody coming. Now, fortunately, nobody tried to attack here, but if they had tried, they'd be waiting here with 20 cannons. Many of them could fire 2 shots a minute, so a lot of cannonballs flying out of here. And they don't look like much, but these little 6-pounders would be flying through the air at about 400 miles an hour, more or less. So you imagine being in a wooden boat rowing this way with the intent to attack us, and one of these things hit you or the boat? Yeah, you wouldn't want to be in one of those boats. So these cannons, they were old and obsolete, but they were adequate to defend this area. And the amount of gunpowder they'd use for the 6-pound ball would have been about 2 pounds of black powder. And black powder is the old-fashioned gunpowder, and they still make that. That's what we use, so there's going to be a lot of smoke. But we're not going to use 2 pounds because, well, it'd be pretty spectacular. It'd be something you would forget for a while. And you wouldn't be able to hear anything for a while either, so. I'll tell you how much gunpowder we really use after we fire the cannon. I think you'd be surprised. Of course, the disappointing news is that we don't actually fire a cannonball. It sounds like it might be fun. It really does. But, you know, we only own 1 cannonball to begin with. But besides that, you know, it's highly illegal to fire cannonballs out into the bay, and the Marine Patrol, and sometimes even the Coast Guard's out there. And we know those guys have no sense of humor. My buddy and I, we don't want to go to prison dressed like this, so this is going to be a blank shot. It's not so loud it's going to damage your hearing. Now, children and anybody else with sensitive hearing, you should cover your ears. So everybody's ready. Here we go. Listo? Viva St. Augustine! Viva! Fuego! That makes the fish jump. All right. Everybody hear that? Well, guess what? Instead of 2 pounds of gunpowder like they used to use, what you just heard was 2 ounces. That little bit of gunpowder can make that noise. You can imagine a couple pounds going off. And the truth is, if we had put a cannonball down the barrel with 2 ounces of gunpowder, it'd still be sitting in the tube. It would have even come out. So, a lot of noise, not a lot of power. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed that. If you have any questions, feel free to hang around. I'll be glad to answer them. If not, we're going to unlock the tower for you to go up. And we got a musket demonstration for another log gang. If you haven't seen that yet, check it out. Have a great day. Thanks for coming, guys.